Have one speaker left on my list, and that is Senator Dr. Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not plan to be long, Mr. President. Mr. President, government is to be commended for its incredible efforts and achievements in trying to compress a 20-year program into 10 years. It is probably achievable. And we should not expect to have everything done right the first time. Not if you are trying to do 20 years work in 10 years on a playing field that is going to be constantly shifting. Mr. President, some time ago, we debated a bill which included discussions about renewable energy, and Senator Greenidge this morning spoke to that. And there are elements in this bill that need repeating. Already we've seen updating of renewable energy systems, and the photovoltaic systems that were installed 5 years ago that were then current generation are now being replaced, and some are being sold on, and that has started the cycle of disposal. Nowhere have I seen any plan for disposal of any of the materials. If the change from fossil-fueled vehicles to electric vehicles is going to happen, there has to be a major plan for disposal of the fossil-fueled vehicles. Not that I would ever wish to see fossil-fueled vehicles disappear. There's nothing like the sound of a good flat six. So I do not wish personally ever, Mr. President, to see fossil fuel vehicles disappear. In fact, Mr. President, in the same way that steam trains have not disappeared, there's always a place for vintage and classic cars. So when we come to the point where we legislate about disposal of cars, there must be consideration for preservation. Mr. President, if we are going to have energy storage, we will need to have large imports of storage devices, batteries, and they are not cheap. They will require even more investment. So those who are early on the grid to supply power might not have to have storage as mandated now, but there should be some consideration that a percentage of power generation beyond a certain capacity should have storage. Otherwise, we will find all of the small householders here on who do not get onto that first phase will have to buy storage, and their costs will be significantly higher. Mr. President, we come back to the same point. When we reach the end of life of these storage devices, what will we do with them? How will we dispose of them? Will they be dumped in the gullies? Will they be in the water courses? Will they end up in our drinking water when they break down? So we need to have some serious discussions in the public sector and in the public domain about what our plans are going to be, and seriously do it before the influx becomes unmanageable. Not for the first time, Mr. President, we heard in another place discussion about a waste-to-energy plant. And unfortunately, it is at the same level as the last time this thing happened. It was discussed in the same way, without any prior public debate. And Mr. President, something as important as a waste-energy plant needs to be discussed in the same way as we've had discussions about renewable energy. It is all part of the process. It would seem unreasonable to tell Barbadians that we will have a waste-energy plant and reduce the need for a large landfill by burning or gasification of our waste, but at the same time, we will have to import waste into this small country. And we would like to assume that forevermore, this will happen smoothly without a single accident. That will not happen. And how will we control what is brought in? Will it only contain the things that we say can come? And when the wrong things arrive and there's a problem, how will we deal with it? It requires, Mr. President, extensive discussion and debate before any agreements are reached and signed off on, Mr. President. Mr. President, I promise to be brief, and I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. Senator Wakani.
Mr. President, I wish to thank all of the honourable members of this House for their contribution to this rather lively and energetic debate. I also especially want to thank all those who have expressed their support for the two bills under consideration as part of this cognate, the Utilities Regulations Amendment Bill and the Fair Trading Commission Amendment Bills 2020. I think this side, we certainly take note that even as Barbados makes its transition into the world of renewable energy, step by meaningful step, that there are many aspects to this transition that we still need to make sure that we have thought through, that we have discussed, and that we have worked out before. A number of the honorable senators identified the fact that we need to look at storage for energy, and we need to look at what is the best way for us to do that in a way that is affordable to all who would be a part of it. Another senator spoke about the need for us to consider too the disposal of old and end-of-life equipment and vehicles as we make the transition to new electric vehicles and the other aspects of our use of different kinds of energy. The question was raised as, not the question, but the opportunities were highlighted for labor, where there is not just those people who would work in the high-tech part of this emerging industry for Barbados. However, there will also be opportunities at all different levels, and that we need to be mindful that we have considered all the opportunities along that value chain, not simply those that are directly tech-related. Indeed, there have been a number of other contributions on this subject, and we will continue as a government to consult with the people. We have heard some mention of another project that was mentioned in the other place, and I would assure you that there are many suggestions that are out there, and our government will continue to do what is necessary to discuss those suggestions in the proper way before we would, of course, be bringing it into the public space in ways that others might not consider to be the best way. That said, Mr. President, I would beg to move that
I think we should do each one at a time now.
that the Utilities Regulations Amendment Bill be read a second time.
The question is that item number 3 on the public business. She was going to the Utilities Amendment Bill as the first one. Pardon? Okay. The question is that the Fair Trading Commission Amendment Bill 2020 be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Now, the further question is, yes, go ahead. Go, proceed to the final stage.
Take it all the way. Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor
Yes.
do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the aforementioned bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill under consideration in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Fair Trading Commission Amendment Act 2020.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And the bill has now been passed and will be cited as the Fair Trading Commission Amendment Act 2020.
order number 3, Mr. President. Order number 3, enabling the Honourable Leader of the Senate to move the second reading of the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2020.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2020 be read a second time.
Yes. The question is that the bill under consideration, namely the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2020, be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for the further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair And the Senate resolved to serve into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill under consideration in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
clause 2,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
clause 3,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
clause 4,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
report,
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Utilities Regulation Amendment Act 2020.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. That is to say, is the Utilities Regulation Amendment Act 2020. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And the bill is now being passed and will be so cited. There are more.
Mr. President, order number 4. In the name of acting, in this case, the bill has been signed to the Honorable Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, who will move the second reading of the Police Amendment Bill 2020.
Thank you. Senator Moore.
Mr. President, I rise to speak on the following bill, the Police Amendment Bill 2020. Now, Mr. President, this bill will amend the Police Act Cap 176, which will make provisions for the composition of the police force to consist of one more Deputy Commissioner of Police. Mr. President,
Earlier this year, the Public Service General Amendment Order 2020 established one post each of an Assistant Commissioner and a Deputy Commissioner of Police. These posts had been previously created as temporary posts in May of 2019. The Public Service General Amendment Order 2020 was gazetted on March 2nd, 2020. This particular bill now, Mr. President, would tidy up the whole arrangement and ensure that the post of a second Commissioner of Police is established. The establishment of this additional post, Mr. President, is considered crucial. As is being created to aid in the transformation and modernization of the Royal Barbados Police Force, to modernize the systems and the rules of the force. As you know, Mr. President, a Deputy Commissioner of Police is an important function within the structure of the police force. Deputy Commissioners have tremendous responsibilities, one being that they act as the Commissioner in the absence of the Commissioner for whatever reason, whether vacation, illness, whatever. They also ensure that all complaints are investigated and appropriate action taken when complaints and things of that nature are made by the general public. They have direct responsibility for overseeing things like the operations of the police band, amongst many duties. And not only that, but under the Deputy Commissioner, they are Assistant Commissioners whose tasks vary as well, that they would ultimately oversee, from human relations to administration services, criminal investigations, operational services, etc. Policing has become very demanding, and it has become more and more difficult to monitor and manage all of the various issues that go along with policing in recent years. Societies in general worldwide have changed, and along with that comes then the responsibility of policing and police to maintain some of the dictates that are required of them. There are more and more demands being made of them. And like anything else, new strategies and approaches are always welcome, and that is so in the creation of a second post of a Deputy Commissioner of Police. Now, when we do this, and you have the two Deputy Commissioners, one of these advantages, it would be that it would lend to greater efficiency and better administrative effectiveness for the force. Policing is like anything else. When you have the ability to disperse responsibilities, and different individuals have that under their remit, it always ends up in better efficiency and effectiveness within any organization, and the police force is no different. It would also allow for particular duties to be assigned under the two deputies. One deputy will be responsible for operations, investigations, and community policing, and the other will be responsible for human resources, as well as administration, and of course, the reform of the Royal Barbados Police Force. Everything in life needs reform at some time. Nothing stays stagnant, and certainly the police force, as important sector as it is, can certainly not be one of those things that could ever be stagnant. So yes, we do need reforms within the Royal Barbados Police Force. Now, in life here in Barbados, we've seen a lot of changes to our society, a lot of changes in our approach to how we do things. I think COVID-19 itself has brought some of that home to us and made us recognize that we really do need to make changes and make them in somewhat expeditiously, simply because our way of life has changed, and we do not know for how long, or it could be changed forever. It all depends on what transpires going forward with this particular pandemic. But certainly, the police force needs some level of modernity. I don't think there's anyone in Barbados that would not agree with that the police force does need some level of modernity. Bajans have long spoken about many of the challenges that they have had with relation to all types of crime. And when I say crime, I'm not just talking about crime, burglaries or robberies, but all types of crime, and we know them, including fraud. I don't think there's a Barbadian that will not tell you that fraud of some type is a factor of their almost everyday existence. No matter where you go, what you're doing, you're always conscious of trying to ensure that you are not a victim of that. I heard one of my fellow senators speaking on the previous bill and speaking about that. And certainly that's a factor of some of the types of crimes that the police are confronted with daily. So Barbados would like to see an improvement in law and order. They want the police to have every available resource to protect our society like any other society worldwide. And we know that policing is not just about solving crimes, but far more than that. They have a tremendous overall responsibility. And one of those responsibilities overall is the maintenance of law and order, public order and safety. Police have to enforce the law. They are also responsible for prevention and detection and investigation of all types of activities, criminal, traffic management, for example, are just some of the examples of the things that the police are involved with on a daily basis as part of their normal functions without stepping out of their normal duties. But while performing some of these functions, different methodologies clearly need to be employed. Worldwide, police have been employing different methodologies in order to assist them with their duties, including things like community relations. I won't go into all of the variant modes that are used, but there are many, and we see that here, and clearly we would want our police force to be as much 21st century as we can have them. Right now, everyone worldwide, I think, has been focusing and speaking about the police. Much of it, maybe not in the most positive way. I know we've seen ourselves some of the unfortunate incidents in another country where people have lost their lives at the hands of the police. We hear people talking about Black Lives Matter and saying in some other jurisdictions that racism plays a part of what has occurred. Some of it, people say, no, it is just poor policing. Regardless of what it is, it's a policing matter. And here in Barbados, we would have our own issues when it comes to policing. Policing is not as easy as you would like it to be because it in itself is a difficult job. You are like in any other job dealing with all types of people, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different communities, different genders, races, the whole gamut of what make us Barbadians, the police have to deal with. We have people who are Barbadians, but may not necessarily be Barbadians, but they're now Barbadians. And they may have their own ways of doing things and looking at life. And all of these are issues that are confronted daily by the police, and you would be surprised, simply because they tend to be the one person you will call once you get into any type of problem. I have heard people, Mr. President, criticize the police, but something go wrong, and the first place, the person they call is police, and they run for the phone. So you're quarreling, and if something barely happen, your neighbor throw 2 breadfruits over your property, and you run and call the police, having just complained about them previously. So the police do not have it easy. But here in Barbados, it is my belief that we have a good police force. We have always had a good police force. Barbadian police, Mr. President, have worked all over the Caribbean. I have worked in many Caribbean islands, and I can say if there's one Barbadian group of individuals you find in these Caribbean islands are Barbadian police. I tell to people, Mr. President, go to the south of St. Lucia, an area called Vieux Fort, and you run across people named Blackman. Well, you will know St. Lucia is a former French and British colony, and many people have French last names. Blackman and Scanterbury are not St. Lucian names. They may have some Franklins, and you never know. But they're clear Barbadian names, and we know them. When we go to places like the BVI and Cayman Islands and Bermuda and all over the Caribbean, Barbadian police are some of the most sought after police that you could want. And there's no denying that. Furthermore, in other Caribbean islands, especially the Eastern Caribbean, where I've spent some time, when I speak to police down there, where have they come to train? Where? They have come to train right here, Mr. President, under the guidance of our police force in order to go back and assist the police in their countries. So there's no doubt that our police force does have some positives, because if it did not, people would not be taking our police to go and work in their countries, and certainly not sending their police here to avail themselves of the expertise and training that is offered here on our shores. But not having said all of that, there are still some challenges, Mr. President, and we know that. We have seen and read about these, so I'm not going to pretend that they don't exist. We've seen police officers going to court on promotion and other issues. We've seen police go to court on wrongful dismissal cases, all sorts of things. The police are citizens of our country as well, and avail themselves of all of the other institutions that any other citizen would avail themselves of. And so we've seen those issues. We've seen some issues with the police force. But clearly, I, like the rest of Barbados, Mr. President, want our police force to have the best available individuals, technology, modernization, and all the other things to make our police force to continue to be one of the best police forces in the world. So I'm not saying the Caribbean because I've traveled extensively, and I can say to you, Barbadian police, with all the challenges that we have here in Barbados, are some of the best worldwide. Now, yes, sometimes they may lack some equipment. Yes, we know they may not have enough personnel within the force itself. We've heard that. We've read it. We've seen that the police force in Barbados is understaffed. They don't have enough policemen. But does it stop them from every day getting up and going to do the job to protect the citizens of Barbados? Absolutely not. The police in Barbados, with all of the challenges, continue to do what's required of them, and that is the protection and safety of every citizen here in this country. So once again, I will say we have a good police force. Now, and it's not just for our protection, make no mistake. We use the police all over the place, especially within tourism sectors. If you go into St. Lawrence Gap, Mr. President, you will see that there are police outposts there in St. Lawrence Gap. We see police up in Oistins. When tourists are around, you go up to Oistins on a weekend, and the police are up there where we have tourists and Barbadians in large numbers mixing. Down Old Town and Spikestown and all the places where visitors gather, the police are there and present and doing their jobs as well. And it instills a sense of confidence by visitors when they see that our police are present and available to them in areas and circumstances where they would want to feel safe and secure, and so they're there and able to enjoy themselves without having to fear that, they don't have the necessary capability or resources to protect them. But is there change and improvements needed? Yes, there are. And some of them have already started, Mr. President. We have seen, for example, and I thank my fellow colleague, Senator McConney, for this, the police certificate of character is now in a digitized environment. So you don't have the long lines and the long waits in order to get something like a police certificate of character. That is a modernization technique for modern policing. So it's already started a digital process and obtain something as simple as that. And why do we need it? So a lot of people need it not just locally for employment, where it could be a requirement, like a security guard, but it's needed oftentimes when you apply for jobs overseas and they require police certificates characters. So therefore you want something that is quick and to obtain, in the sense that you're not waiting months and months for it. We've also seen some other improvements like cameras. In some areas of Barbados, we see cameras on the road. If you look up when you're driving, I hope you look and you notice these things, you will see there are cameras in certain areas that are used for policing techniques. If you go in St. Lawrence Gap, you'll see a few used for policing techniques. There's been improvements in the forensic area of policing here. Does that mean that we are where we want to be? No, not at all. But we understand the need and have always understood the need for improvements within any sector, and the police force is no different, and that's why you had continuous improvements in forensics in Barbados and that area, and more people being trained in order to try to ensure that we keep abreast of what the standards are, not just locally, but regionally and ex-regionally. Now, we've also seen community policing in the past, Mr. President. Community policing, that was the type of policing we've seen. I remember many years ago when I was a lot younger, myself and Senator Franklin, we were a lot younger. They were community police in the Bush Hall area. In the Bush Hall area, for example, there's an area I remember clearly going, and they had community policing, police outposts. And there are other areas. I mean, as I said, there's one right now in St. Lawrence Gap, but there are other areas. And what does that then embody? Embodies a relationship with the community. It reduces certain types of crime because the police are there and they are present and available readily. And so we've seen that, and it has worked well in the past. I do not know where it will go in the future, but certainly there has been clearly a diminution of crime when you do have police present in an area. Now, the police force and this particular bill, Mr. President, is one that is needed. I don't think there is a single person listening to me that understands the need to ensure, one, the continuous safety, security, and protection of Barbadians. Two, the police force, like any other entity, needs to be upgraded, modernized, and brought into the 21st century as much as we can within the resources that are available to you as any government. And three, you have the best available personnel to assist you in that endeavor. Because like in any other aspect of life or any other type of area or any other area of life, that is what one does and needs in order to ensure the continuous development of an entity. And so that is what is needed right now here within the Barbados Police Force. And so, Mr. President, this particular amendment will then serve this purpose by creating the second Deputy Commissioner of Police, which is a much needed position and post. And as I said before, that post, in addition to another post, there were acting posts from 2019. And this will now bring this into reality and ensure that Barbadians continue to enjoy one of the best police forces in certainly the Caribbean region. And with that, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a second time.
I recognize Senator Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't endeavor to be too long. I've had my say on this police amendment bill and the changes to the police force in other areas, but I will just mention a few here. And you got to understand the history before we get into this debate. I'm going to go into history. This bill has nothing to do with modernizing the police force or anything like that. What it's doing, it is to redress what the government sees as an injustice. Whether it is an injustice or not, I do not know. But let me explain to the Senate what this injustice is all about. Because government is not about selecting persons. This is about selecting a person for a job. And a person who the government feels was hard done by. So they went about this, creating a second post, not with the aim of being police need human resource specialist or whatever. That's nonsense, complete nonsense. You had to find something to say, so you come up with these reasons. And if you look, you will realize over time they have changed the reasons why you needed this Deputy Commissioner of Police. The Deputy Commissioner of Police isn't doing anything that the Assistant Commissioner wasn't doing before. So you don't really need it. But as I said, it was to reward a person who you felt was hard done by. And the history? The person who is now occupying the post that don't exist yet, because he's occupying it all like now. And when it was brought to their attention, they should have said, sorry, but you got to step back because this thing is illegal. So you doing something, we have done something wrong. No, the government continued in illegality till they can bring the matter here. So right now, the person who is occupying the post and doing the job as a Deputy Commissioner of Police is doing so illegally because the Governor General has not signed off on this bill that we're now discussing. So what they should have done is to say, look, we made a mistake, let me step back. But no, they were adamant. This gentleman used to act as Commissioner of Police when there was a vacancy. He was the more senior person. And then there was a vacancy for the post. And this is where the politics come in. You see, the politicians have to keep their hands off the civil service because it only causes confusion. So what did they do? A vacancy for deputy comes up, and he got bypassed. So he's no longer acting as deputy, he's no longer in the post of deputy because they put a person in the deputy's position and he reverted. And this administration think that he was hard done by, so they're fixing this by making him a second deputy. They did it in 2019, contrary to law. There is no provision in law right now where the Prime Minister or any minister responsible for civil service can create a temporary post or an established post of Deputy Commissioner of Police. That power resides in the Police Act, Section 6. But you know what the problem is? And I believe that the Prime Minister said, well, we got to fix this. We got to get this man this job because he got unfair. And the people who advise the Prime Minister said, well, look, we can create a temporary post and give the Prime Minister that advice. It was bad advice. Because I tell you, Prime Minister knows about public service matters. She was too new. She might be learning now. But at that point in time, she knew nothing about it. So she got bad advice, and she created a temporary post of Deputy Commissioner of Police. That was wrong. Still is wrong today. But going back to how it started. So we have this gentleman who was not successful at the interview for the post of deputy. A person junior to him got the job. If you all will remember, that promotion or those sets of promotions at the time were subject to a lawsuit. Some of the police who thought that they were hard done by that promotion went to court. And the court had the promotions on hold for a long time, pending the outcome. There was an injunction, pending the outcome of that case. But that case got resolved by, I think it was death. And just before the last election, the Police Service Commission was able then to fill the post because the case was no longer before the court. So they filled it with the current deputy. This administration came in, and mind you, the Police Service Commission at the time did nothing wrong. I'm talking about by filling the post, because there, even though it was just before election, there was still the commission, and they could fill the post when it was available to be filled, and they did so. In comes this government, and they decided, look, we got to fix what the Dems did. The Dems are unfair or man. So they created an illegal deputy position and put their man in it. I heard over time people saying, oh, he was on the priority list, so the person who was number 2 was the number 1 on the priority list would have been made deputy. That is nonsense. A priority list is only valid for 2 years. He got the job about 4 years after that priority list. So that is not true. That was an explanation to fool the public who don't know the Public Service Act. But I'm not one of those persons who don't know the Public Service Act. So if you look at the Recruitment and Employment Code in the public service, it says the priority list is valid for 2 years. So this post should have been subject to interviews. And whosoever will should have been able to apply and contest for the post. No, you didn't do that because you wanted a particular person. When I say you, I mean the government. But it was to help him out. You see? And then to blame it on the commissioner asking for a post and every kind of thing else. All over the public service, people ask to have things done. And they don't get done. I can give you a few just now. But let me tell you what is the benefit to the person who holds the post. And this is what this is all about. A person in the public service, after working 33 and 30 years, qualifies for a full pension. But your pension is calculated based on the last 36 months' earnings. So you backdate it to 2019. So he would have 2019, 2020, and he's retiring in October 2021. So that will give him the 3 years that he needs to get a full pension at that level. This is what this is all about. That is why you're backdating this legislation for 3 years. That's all it is. So this is to help out with making him get the better pension. And as a matter of fact, that pension will now be $4,773.74 a month, and he will get a gratuity of $238,687. If he has stayed at the position as assistant commissioner, the pension would be $482.43 less, and he would have gotten $24,121.50 gratuity less. So this is about giving a fellow piece more change. This isn't about no needs of the police force. This is the needs of the person who they're put in the job without going through interviews. In accordance with the law. A law that I am passed, a law the Barbados Labour Party passed, and as one of the last things that the Barbados Labour Party passed in 2007, just before the got to the office in 2008. So this is what this Barbados Labour Party put on the books, and ignoring it every time because it does not suit their purpose. They want to give their man $24,000 gratuity more, and they want to give him a monthly pension of $402.83 more than he would have gotten at the deputy. This is what it's all about. So don't come and try to fool the public. Tell the truth. So that'll be my hand we have fixed here. This is what this is all about. So when you tell me no, that this was to improve the human resources and all kinds of stuff, police resources, to manage the human resource processing, that's nonsense. Human resources is not a police function. You need a senior or a principal personnel officer at that level to do the human resource work. You don't need a crime fighter to do human resources. They are doing, even though I have my problems with the human resources and the industrial relations in the KFL, even though I have a problem with it, I prefer what they did at Labour College. As I said that to them, they are churning out a lot of people, training human resources, and you take a crime fighter and put him in charge of human resources? No. Police, going back for a while now, they have been taking away civilian duties from the police and letting the police do more policing. I remember when I became an immigration officer, that used to be a function of the police. The police trained me to be an immigration officer. They took that function away from the police and built a civilian immigration department because that was not necessarily a police duty. Same thing with the licensing authority. When I went in for my license, I went in with the police took me in. The police were the testing officers. So they took away those functions. So when you take away human resources and give it a professional human resource person, no, because you had to make up an excuse to try to justify putting a person in this post. No, the police need trained human resource people. You don't need a deputy commissioner, a crime fighter to do human resources. We're dealing with criminals. No, you deal with police officers. You don't need a crime fighter to deal with human resource matters. But that's the government's excuse. Tell the truth. So they said the commissioner of police asked for this post. So they rush to do it. I want that same alacrity that the government rushed with for other sectors of the public service. For instance, I just became aware, not recently, that since it is, let me get my notes because I don't want to mislead, March 2019, people in the statistical department have been working overtime. They were doing what they call the continuous labor force sample survey and the retail price index from March 2019. And they do it on an overtime basis. They may get overtime yet. No, but they rush with that kind of speed, that kind of alacrity to fix up them. Like how they rushed when the commission said, I want another deputy. I sure you didn't mean he would. But since 2019, and those people at statistics ain't get sent yet. Every month they work overtime. And overtime accumulating. As a matter of fact, there are a few of them who do it. And it amounts to something like $40,000 from 2019 to now. And you can't find $20,000, but you're looking to give him $24,000 more gratuity. This is what it's all about. You see, people who actually work, you aren't paying them, you aren't rushing to pay them, but you're rushing to sort out the fella pension. All right? Well, if you want to sort out things, when you came here last year, and you changed the system at the airport where you go to the kiosk now and you type in your name, you didn't need the people who typed in the information from the ED cards. So they were made redundant. To this day, they may get sent. Nobody rushing to pay them. So when you rushing to sort out this, he's more important or he's more party friendly? people didn't get sent yet? No? Some of the same people in the statistical department, I remember that some of them have been acting in temporary in established posts for 10 or more years. They have not been appointed. Nobody rushing to appoint them after 10 or more years. But you're rushing to sort out your man because you only have till October next year before you go home. So you got to backdate everything to make sure you get a big pension or a bigger pension. This is almost like corruption, you know. It is certainly political interference in the public service. It is that for sure, but it also smells like corruption to me.
Mr. President, on a point of order, I hate to interrupt my colleague's center in his flow, but the comments of corruption, Mr. President, I think are inappropriate, and would request that you ask my colleague to desist from those comments or withdraw them.
Mr. President, I never said the boy was corrupt. I said it looked like that to me. It might not look so to you. It smells like that. I must have my smellers. And I must be able to smell something. If it smells like, I can smell, you want to tell me what it smells? Or how it smells like to me? You might look at a rose and you smell it, and it smells beautiful to you. Like, bad. You know, this just smells bad to me. It looks bad and it smells bad. And they said it smells like corruption. It might not be. They doubt it. You know? So go and sort out those people. Look at the persons. In 2007, this Barbados Labour Party passed the Public Service Act. And it said at section 13.7, persons who are employed 3 years prior to the commencement of this act, which was the 31st of December 2007, are entitled to be appointed to the post. And it also said that all those temporary posts, all, are hereby established. To date, 2020, some of those people didn't get appointed yet. So government ain't seeing these things. They're rushing to appoint one man. But what about the people who have not been appointed since? And I hear the Prime Minister talking about, people who've been appointed 3 years or more will get appointed. Well, they said that in 2007, you know. And up in the 3 years ain't come yet for those people in 2007. If you were in the public service from the 1st of January 2005 and you were still there in 2007, December 31st, you should have been appointed. Some of those appointments have not been processed as yet. But you rush. The same people that process these appointments are the same people who would have possessed the appointment for the commissioner or the deputy commissioner. But the man should get his done. But you don't get the people there. You don't get the people at statistics once started after 10 or more years. I understand there's one fellow who's been there 16 years. Subject to correction, of course. And he's been acting all this time. But nobody has sorted them out. Nobody has sorted those fellows because they might not be party friendly or they might not be party, however you judge them. You know? Also, let me talk about something that you're rushing to fix. In 2014, the last incompetent government that we had removed the pensions of persons who were declared medically unfit for further work, because they said that they were getting a national insurance invalidity benefit. We all know now that the invalidity benefit is not the same thing as the national insurance pension. Let me go back. 1975. Government said if you join the service after the 1st of September 1975, your pension from the government, from the Treasury, will be reduced by the amount you get from the National Insurance pension, which is the National Insurance contributory pension. Trying to save money, the last administration said, oops, you know something? These people on invalidity benefits who are working and not declared medically unfit, they're getting a national insurance pension. So we're going to stop their pensions. We now know that there were two different things altogether. The invalidity benefit and the national insurance old age contributory pension, not the same thing. If you look at the General Orders 8.4, it says your pension will be reduced by the amount of the national insurance old age contributory pension. And invalidity benefit is not a national insurance old age pension, contributory old age pension. As a matter of fact, again, when you're getting the invalidity benefit ceases if you are no longer invalid because people can get better, or when you reach the age to qualify for national insurance old age pension, national insurance contributory pension. So it can't be it can't be the same thing when it ceases when you get the other one. And government has taught us, there are several people who this government has, the last one and this one, have not restored their pensions yet. Some have gone on and died. And the government, but you rush in, you move with alacrity to fix problems that didn't exist. But you rushing in here to give your man a pension. I am tired with these bills coming before this, these special interest bills, these We Friends bills and that kind of stuff that you do here, because all these special interest things you do them for one or two people, the people that are your friends, and forgetting the people who voted for you. Those people who are invalidity benefits, they vote too. The people who are not getting their appointments, they vote too. I don't know who they vote for, but they vote too. And then you come in here and come with a bill that says it is the object of this bill is to appoint, the exact wording, an act to amend the police act, caps 167, to provide for 2 deputy commissioners and for related matters. No, it's just to provide for two deputy commissioners of police. The related matters is just fluff, because all the other amendments to this thing are necessary. They don't make sense. They're not necessary. They don't improve the police force or anything. For instance, but you had to play your amendments because it looked real bad if you just put a bill in there to give this man a pension. So you go and put you say that he do that the act for the police, the assistants to the police. No, they're not assistants. They're deputies. This is 2 different things, A deputy can do whatever the chief does, but the assistant can't. So they're not. So they even got the things mixed up. But they're rushing to do these things to sort out their mistakes, and they're making one mistake on top of the next. Look, I know you will have supporters and friends and people you like and things, but it is not your business to come into the public service and destroy the public service, and in this case, try to destroy the police force. I'll tell you something. When this matter first came up, when I first noticed it, I remember, because I had done some consultations with the people who were forming the protective services association, and I was meeting with them. So they consist of the police, fire, and prison officers. So they can't ask me to consult, and I don't really act. So I went to read all 3 acts and make sure when they go in there and talking to people, I know what they're talking about. And when I saw this appointment that said the Protected Services Commission appointed, I said, no, I'm going to read the police act. I come and say, one, you know. So I went back and checked. And they only provided for 1. Only ever provided for 1. You went and you provide for 2. You broke the law. And having broken the law, you refuse to admit your mistake. No, you know, see, none of us are perfect. We'll make mistakes. But when you make mistakes, admit them and move on. Say, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing and make a mistake. We can't get me. We got a prime minister, another prime minister, I'm not going to call it the name of the country, but he's making all kind of mistakes and things. And he comes out and apologizes every time. He's booked 3 apologies the last year or so. No, and he apologizes. He apologizes. Take a leaf out of his book. You have done the wrong thing. You have put down what you've done. You have actually, instead of improving the police force, you have put police. You set up the anger. Put some of them vexed. Because some of them wanted to act, some of them wanted to be able, if you can have 2 deputies, they wanted to be able to apply and see and drop their chances. You know, you design a post for 1 man. And when they wrote about it, you know, I got a lot of police friends. Man, they walk in the road and I hear the police van, beep, 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 and they look at the fella shaking at me. So it tells me there's not a popular move. That what I'm saying resonated with the police. Police pass about my house and blowing the horn. I'm going to look, they just shake at me and moving on. No, you see? You know why? Because I stood up for them here. And I stood up for them when they wrote in the newspaper, so they appreciate it. Because they can't speak for themselves. And that's another thing I want to talk about, you see? We have a police force in Barbados that we think operating in the 19th century. You have a police act that have them as paramilitary people. They can't join unions, they can't do anything like that. Right? That is old-fashioned, archaic. You want to modernize the police force? Give the police the right to join trade unions. I'm not saying give them the right to strike, because trade unions are not all about striking. But you have the police being controlled by an old English law. Because you know the police force was designed to keep people down. I'm talking about the natives. So you had to give them power. Like, for instance, you call a policeman an idiot, that's a crime. But if you call the government an idiot, nobody should get look at your heart, but they're not lock up. They're not fine for that. You know what I'm saying to you? So if you can say this, you call the prime minister a fool. And that's the prime minister, and that's not a crime. But you can look at a constable and say, boy, you're an idiot. And he charge you. So we need a whole sort of revamping and revisiting and revising the police act and on all things about policing. If we just didn't need another deputy commissioner, wait, look, there are so many things in the police act that needs to be changed to benefit police. And stop making police more like slaves than anything else. Because the act was not designed for this era. So you should fix the police act. Just don't want to fix one thing because you want to put your man in place. Let the police join unions. Let them bargain collectively. You know? That's what you need to do. And not only police, they're talking about fire and also the prisons. We are not moving to fix things that need fixing. Or things that want. Look, no mention prison, I'm going to talk about that. About 8 years ago, in the prison, this man is still being investigated. A prisoner emerged from in the ladies' room in the cupboard while an officer was undressing, female officer.
This is human out.
Pardon?
Are we in the human out?
You know, that case is still being investigated. But the guy who did it, the guy who was hiding in the cupboard, the prisoner that was hiding in the cupboard, he was escorted to that room and left in there. The guy who brought him there, he got promoted. And the guy who was hiding, he was in prison for rape and murder. And then, a little after that, he got let out for good behavior. And the only body that suffered after 8 years in investigation, official investigation yet. 8 years. So that means things that the government should move by. I don't know if the minister knows about it, because when I speak to him about other things in the prison, he tells me, oh, that happened before my time, so he ain't dealing with it. Tell me so. So fix the things that need fixing. That's what I try to say to you. I'm going to give you a few examples. I have a lot more, but I wrote to the Director General and I gave her the amount of things that I wanted. So I'm not going to go through all, but there are things that need fixing in the public service more urgently than they need fixing. Like, for instance, we need whistleblower protection, and we need it badly in the public service. Fix that. It is an offense in the public service if you see somebody committing an offense and you don't report them. But you know, if you report them, what's happened to you? You're in trouble. I know one fellow who's a court marshal who reported his senior for perjury. And when he reported, he got demoted. You know? And they tell you you must report these things in accordance with the guidelines. This is in accordance with paragraph 11 of the code, paragraph 11 and 12 of the Code of Conduct and Ethics. But you know, since 2007, they may get the guidelines developed yet. You are telling people, no, if you breach these procedures, you're subject to punishment. But they have not set out the guidelines as yet. And you're rushing to give a fella a job. You've got too many things in the public service to fix. If you don't read the Code of Conduct and Ethics in Public Service, paragraph 11 and 12, you can, if the minister asks you to do something, you can say to them, sorry, minister, that's against the law, and don't do it. Mm-hmm. But there's a procedure for doing so, but they must have to spell out the procedure. Fix that. There's urgent need for a sexual harassment policy in the public service. Government has mandated it, and every workplace has to have a sexual harassment policy, but I don't see any them happening in the public service. Fix them. You need to fix that, because young people, and I'm not saying young girls, no, because they trouble the boys too, should not have to come to work and suffer at the hands of a predator. So put the guidelines in place, put the procedures in place that they would know what to do if it happens. Fix those things. Those things are more urgent than giving your fellow a bigger pension. Also, what you need to fix, one of the hardest jobs anywhere in the world is teaching. Especially when you're teaching small children. And teachers have, over the years, enjoyed something called terms leave. After 15 years of service, you get a terms leave, and then you get a second term leave after another 7, and then another term. The government has refused to give the teachers their terms leave. Mind you, the teachers' unions have not complained about it. Mind you, the teachers are complaining, but the unions now have all been taken over. Not all. They have been effectively taken over, so they're not fighting for the workers anymore. Fix those things. Give back the teachers their leave. Because let me tell you something, it isn't easy facing 25 or so children in your class, each one with a different personality, got their own problems from home, and you trying to teach them and keep them in order. After a while, it plays on you. Teachers get tired. And they need to de-stress. So what you're doing now, you're asking teachers to work for 30 years and 40 years without that necessary break, so that they can recharge the batteries. And it is there, it's on the agenda, and nobody is fixing it. But you find time to rush to this house and the other place to give your friend a bigger pension. This is what it's all about. There are many more, and I would be happy to share them with the Minister responsible for public service. And anybody has the ability to listen. But, sir, this Parliament must not be used as a tool for rewarding what you might consider to be your friends, your political allies. This, or who you feel to be your political friends or your allies or your cousins or whoever they are. This is about serious business, and this isn't serious business. This is flying in the face of the people who elected you. This bill should not have seen the light of day. When you get catch with your hands in the cookie jar, you let go of the cookie and take out your hand. But no, they want to keep that, they want to keep the cookie. So they keep they're fighting to make sure that they get their way. They will get their way because they have the numbers, but it looks bad. And you consistently do things to make yourselves look bad. I don't mind them in opposition, so when you look bad, it is your business. It wouldn't go down to your benefit, but when you do these things, people are watching. People are watching. Stop these personalized events that you rush in here to do for your friends. This Parliament is not about doing jobs for your friends. That is not what you were elected to do. You're elected to run the country, and right now you're running it into the ground. Mr. President, I will say no more. I hope what I've said so far does not fall on deaf ears. A word to the wise is enough.
Thank you, sir. Senator Althea begins.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. President, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak on the amendment to the Police Act. Right now, all over the world, sir, police forces are under scrutiny for all types of reasons, be it Black Lives Matter, race and class profiling, and generally for all the wrong reasons. I mean, currently in Barbados, we are looking to modernize our police force, and with this new world order that this pandemic, as I call it, has brought about, it is time now to review the structure of our force and look at the technologies that can be deployed to affect this change. Each person in here must have had an encounter with a policeman, and I can tell you what mine is besides being married to one. Recently, just before lockdown, I was going down by the old immigration department, and when I got to the junction there, I stopped because I saw some policemen there, you know, some cars, so I thought it was an accident. So, you know, you stop and you look before you proceed to see what happened. So when I came out to the junction, the policeman said, "Come over, lady, pull over," and he stopped me. So I stopped. I was like wondering what happened. I know my license and everything is in order. He said, "Madam, you didn't stop at that traffic. You did not stop at that stop sign." I said, "Yes, officer, I stopped at the stop sign." You telling me, you calling me a liar that I ain't stopped at the stop sign?" I said, "Officer, I stopped at that stop sign, and I stopped because it's a stop sign, number one. And number two, I saw all these people stop there, so you stop to realize what's happening. Let me see your license. Give me your license." So I took it out nicely, and I gave it to him. And he said, "So how old you is? How old you is?" I said, "Wait a minute, you have my license. It has all my information on it. You can see how old I am. So you expect me to subtract that there and tell you to how old I am?" My response then was, "Did you go to training school?" I'm like, I have never encountered a policeman so uncouth in my life. You have my license, you see it's in order, you're asking me my age, and I told you it's on the form. Where do you live? Where do you live? I told him I live. But this don't have where you live, what you're saying to me. I said, "Officer, you asked me where I live. I told you where I'm living." Every single person that I have recounted that story to, Mr. President, asked me at that time, why didn't I tell him that I'm a senator? I said, "For what? What am I supposed to tell him I'm a senator for? I did not break any laws, and he's not supposed to be uncouth to anybody, regardless of your station in life." So, I said, "Listen, I don't think you went to the training school, and I'm gonna have to do something about this, because you are really uncouth." I didn't bother to tell him that I was married to a policeman, and I know majority of the policemen in the force. I said, "You must be new, because I don't even know you." So he said, "Look, take your license and you go ahead." And that's all, because I didn't reply to him. I had two young persons in the car, and they must see that you must not be rude to policemen. But personally, I think that one of the first things on the card is that these young policemen must be trained. I know, and like I said, I was married to one, so I know the deal. A lot of them are mandated to go there and just pull people off the road to get points, to get promotion, to say that they brought in a certain amount of reports in a day. So I know all of this. But of course, I didn't bother to tell him who I was, neither that my husband was a policeman, nothing. I told him nothing. I just let him carry on smartly, Mr. President. I don't know what happened to him after that, but, I think that a lot of the young policemen today, they need a lot of training. Believe you me, they have no communication skills, and they're not supposed to address people in that type of manner. As I was saying earlier, the use of technology in the force is going to help the Royal Barbados Police Force and police forces all over the world improve their practices in terms of how reports and everything. We know the closed-circuit television. Earlier, my colleague, Senator Moore, referred to the CCTV that is in St. Lawrence Gap and so on, and the amount of cameras that are being installed island-wide now. In terms of the cameras, too, that are being installed island-wide, I think they should now be upgraded and enhanced with what we call the automatic number plate recognition, whereby if you break a traffic light and so on, this happens obviously in Europe, the camera goes off quickly, take your number plate. It happened to our diplomatic vehicle already. The driver broke the traffic lights, and before we got back to the mission, the report was practically in that the diplomatic car broke the traffic lights. So we need this kind of technology effectively to help police Barbados. And you would find that on mornings you hear the sergeant doing the traffic reports. he would not have to depend on the traffic cops that are on the road. He would be in operations control, in the control room, looking at a whole set of televisions that would be guiding him as to where the traffic stops are, where the people who are breaking the laws, and all the information, and is being fed back in real time into operations control. Another area where technology would help the Royal Barbados Police Force is the whole question, Mr. President, of the dash cams that the policemen in the bigger countries wear. The interesting thing about these dash cams, Mr. President, is that when there's a dispute, somehow you hear that the dash cams malfunction. But my understanding is that in terms, again, of Europe, that these dash cams are logged into the control system. So even if the officer interferes with his dash cam at a moment in time, it does not affect the information that is being fed back to the control room. So he could as well don't play with his dash camera that way. And as you know, when policemen stop you and they're recording statements, their old time used to be take out the thing and they're writing and they're writing and they're writing. Nowadays, you can record these statements with technology using your own cell phones, both by voice and by text. That way, both persons are recording, and then in the end, these statements can be reconciled. Another area of technology that I would like to see the force use more widely, in other words, greater penetration, would be that of drones. So for an example, a drone can be launched from an offshore boat patrol to scan an area that's under surveillance. These drones can also be used for search and rescue operations. They can be used as well for searching marijuana fields. And searching these marijuana fields is very critical because sometimes the growers of these marijuana fields tend to leave traps for the policemen, and policemen have been known to be injured by these traps that are left. These drones can utilize what we call thermal imaging to identify bodies and metals that are concealed, to injure persons, and so on. Elsewhere, in terms of policing, farmers complain a whole lot about their crops are being stolen, and I've said it many times in the past, that drones can also be used in prairie larceny. So a policeman cannot be on every farm. You can use drones to more or less help the policeman and assist the policeman with that operation. While I was doing my research for this paper, I was checking in terms of to see if the Royal Barbados Police Force has a social media page. They have a Facebook page, but not a lot, like the Defense Force. They post a lot of information on their page, but I noticed the RBPF, they're not putting anything on their page. I think that they need to be a greater degree of technology. Maybe they need to hire an information and communications technology persons to help them with their social media. And in helping them with that social media, they are, in fact, would be able to stay in touch in many ways, because where I live now, we have a virtual neighborhood watch. We don't have a neighborhood, because during lockdown again, a lot of persons were trespassing. And we had decided, well, we need to have a meeting. Sorry, this is prior to lockdown. We wanted to have a neighborhood watch meeting, but the neighbors are not interested in meeting in person like we were when I lived at another address. So I'm saying that we should be able to log into the police social media, let them know what's going on, upload videos of people and the trespassing that's going on within neighborhoods, and this would be such a better way of utilizing the technology and assisting the Royal Barbados Police Force. We know now that through the Ministry of Information Science and Smart Technology, the police certificate of character can be done online. Mr. President, also we have something called a records management system, and this records management system can be used in many ways. And one of the ways that I would like to highlight is addressing the whole question of domestic violence. People would tell you that repeatedly women would complain to the policemen about domestic violence. I don't know if they ever recorded these statements, but subsequently after, obviously there's a murder, then, there's a lot of talk about what the police should and should not have done. Now, if they had an effective records management system, you would see the amount of times that females especially go and complain for, their spouses for beating them, and then subsequently a lot of them are murdered. I know the Royal Barbados Police Force, that they have access to network counseling services. I know they have a chaplain on staff, but I think that they need to have policemen now trained in different areas like marriage counseling, because normally when there are disputes in a house, invariably the police is the first port of call, Mr. President. And I think that there are parts of their force now that need to be expanded, both by technology and other personnel, in terms of social issues that happen in Barbados. And this would also help Barbadians to feel a little bit more comfortable when they complain to the police department, so that they know that they can have what we would call satisfaction. In the old days, you would say you're going to get satisfaction. So I think that the policemen need to be able to change their modalities, change their way of thinking, and change to fit this new world that's happening. In terms of human resources, I think that the force need to more or less look at its pre-employment screening practices. And these should involve things such as drug testing and psychological analysis. And this vetting that should be going on in the police force will be for things such as firearms, drugs, intelligence, financial crimes, cybercrime, and so on. Because there have to be protocols that will be deployed, especially in the use of firearms, because we know that sometimes there can be incidents or accidents involving firearms that can sometimes result in the death of people, and sometimes their own officers. So they're saying that they need more capacity building within the force, more capacity building in terms of the personnel and the type of training that they should have. Training such as terrorism training, cybercrime, sex investigations, and of course maximizing the use of technology. And forensics. Forensics is big. And everything that's happening worldwide happens in Barbados. So things such as forensic scenes of crime investigations, for accidents, for fires, murders, these things have to be enhanced within a modern police force, Mr. President. So crime scenes management, digital forensics, intelligence, these are the things that are talked about, but we want to see these things implemented in the Royal Barbados Police Force. If it means that, because I know a lot of top policemen in the United Kingdom that are Barbadians, The other day, one of them texted me and asked me if I think he can get a job with the RBPF. I said, well, I wouldn't know, but he's very well trained. He's very well trained. And there are a lot of them, I can tell you, in the United Kingdom and they would want to come back to Barbados, Mr. President, and serve this country. So I think that overall, these are the things that we have to look at: training the existing cadre in the force, and also sending a lot of them abroad to train, and then bringing in people from abroad, mostly Barbadians, who are very highly trained in these other jurisdictions, to augment the Royal Barbados Police Force. We know in terms of Barbados, there are about 13 stations now. We just had the merger of the Worthing and Hastings Police Force, so there are only now 13, and I think Belplain is now merged with District F. So I think one of the things, too, that the police need to do would be to look at the demographic of Barbados, look at the concentration of crimes in Barbados, look and see where new police stations can be strategically located, just like with fire stations, so that they can be quick responses to incidents and so on in Barbados. So I believe, Mr. President, that overall the Royal Barbados Police Force need to be revamped, upgraded, training in technology, training in scenes of crimes, training in forensics, and these things, don't be afraid to highlight the shortages that the force has. So it is not only shortages in actual personnel, because the technology can take the place of personnel. You might think we need more people, but technology can cut out a lot of that. So, Mr. President, I hope that with those few words, I have highlighted a number of areas where the Royal Barbados Police Force can be improved, and also, as I said, with training and help their forces not to be so ill-mannered when they're dealing with people, and, more customer service oriented. And Mr. President, with those few words, I'm obliged to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I next recognize Senator Greenidge.
And I thank you for recognizing me, sir. Mr. President, the person who came under the most criticism for this, I wouldn't say a fiasco, this misunderstanding, mistake, whatever, relating to the second Deputy Commissioner of Police, was the Attorney General. Some people had even asked for his resignation on it. And when I reflected on it, I thought to myself that it was indeed unfortunate that some persons actually took this harsh position. So I want to begin, thank you, by looking back at centuries ago when the English people coined a phrase, and that phrase was, "Uneasy is the head that wears the crown." Uneasy is the head that wears the crown. And I think what the English were saying there is that the monarch, whether it be the king or the queen, never has an easy job. That sitting on that throne was no bed of roses. That the person at the helm, generally, not necessarily on the throne, is always responsible. And I thought to myself, you know something? Over the years, attorneys general in Barbados have found themselves in similar positions. They're always in the firing line. Uneasy is the head that wears the crown. And so it took me back to over 40 years, and I know you will remember, Mr. President, about that which I now speak. I attended, sir, a meeting in the St. Patrick's area. I live in St. Philip. And for the people who do not know the relationship between St. Patrick's and St. Philip, St. Patrick's is the most easterly corridor of Christchurch, but it is the most westerly corridor of St. Philip. It is there that the two parishes kiss. And so I went to a meeting over there, and it was a meeting at the time Mr. Maurice King was the Attorney General of Barbados. And I had at that stage, and I still have now, the greatest respect for that man, Mr. Maurice King. I was not yet a member of the Barbados Labour Party, and therefore I can speak with a certain amount of innocence on this matter. On the platform was obviously a member of the Barbados Labour Party. And his thesis, his criticism, his attack on that stage was that the Attorney General does not know what is going on. And they were throwing some lashes in Mr. King. And the speaker, I almost call his name, the speaker went on to say, you know why he's no good? Everybody is suing him. Everybody is suing him. They're suing him left, right, and center. Sir, you and I would know that that would have been at a time when there were no boards. So if something happens today at Princess Margaret School, a student slips on a wet pavement or some student falls, you sue the board. These were the days, sir, when you just identified the ministry, but you sued the Attorney General. So whether it be MTW, whether it be the Ministry of Education, whether it be the hospital, the Ministry of Health, whatever, you sue the Attorney General. So they read off a long list of cases which involve the Attorney General. Everybody is suing the Attorney General, he said, and he read off this long, long list. Today, if anything happens at the hospital, you sue a board. You don't sue the AG now. If anything happens at a school, you sue the board, the school board. But in those days, you sued the Attorney General. And sir, and he said the conclusion to be drawn, the speaker said, was that the Attorney General did not know what he was doing. And poor Mr. King would not have known what went on at this school or that school, or whether your car dropped in a hole along the road for MTW. And he was being criticized as someone who did not know what he was doing. And so I said to myself, I turned to a fellow Gates that would take me there. He said, "Boy, this thing sounds unfair to me." And that is why he says, sir, uneasy is the head that wears the crown. But they didn't stop there, sir. They didn't stop there, the criticism of him that evening. They didn't stop there. They said that murders were on the increase, and robberies and rapes and crime generally was on the increase. And they said, they were arguing that he was responsible for putting the brakes on crime. So he has to be blamed for this increase in crime. As far as I know, poor Mr. King never committed any crime in his life. Not as far as I know.
Or encourage any.
Hmm?
Or encourage encourage any.
But, sir, they said he is the Attorney General and he is responsible. I didn't think that was a fair accusation. But, sir, as I said, uneasy is the head that wears the crown. I don't want, sir, to be pedantic in any way. I don't want to. But I must make this point. Our Attorney General has had his share of criticism too. Some, most of it, not fair. And uneasy is the head that wears the crown. And sir, I'll tell you about this one. I'll tell you about this one, sir. When I was at law school, I learned of a rule called the EJUSDEM, that's it, E-J-U-S-D-E-M. Pronounced like if the J was an H. EJUSDEM generous rule. And it had to do with legal drafting and statutory interpretation. And sir, that is a rule that says that where particular words are followed by general words, the general words must be construed as EJUSDEM generis of the same category with the former. So the general words must be limited by reference to the former words. A bit confusing the way it is put. But sir, what it is actually saying is this. If you hear me say, or if you read in an act about zinnias and begonias and gerberas and sunflowers and daisies and daffodils and such like comes after that, you are restricted to flowers. You are restricted to flowers. You can't imagine that behind there will be mango trees and so on. You are restricted to flowers. Sir, I'll give you an example of what I mean, and then I'll tie it in, and you'll see exactly where I'm coming from. Sir, in Canada, they had a law that said during hunting time, you are allowed to hunt doves, plovers, wild ducks, partridges, and other game, No, sir, a fellow was caught. He shot a deer. And he paid dearly for it. And his position, no pun intended, and his position was he was hunting, but then he was told, no, you are restricted to this. Sir, a father took his son to university and took him to the bank, rich man. And he told the son, now I am going to put some money here, and you have to use this money to purchase books, notebooks, slide rule, laboratory equipment, and anything else that you need. That was put to him in writing. And no sooner had the father turned his back that this youngster bought a sports car. He bought a sports car. The father said, you have to resell that car and put every cent back on the bank. You know what he told him? Went to court. Father took him to court to make him sell it. And the court held that he had to sell the car, that what the father was saying here, anything to do with your classroom, Yes, the father had said, as I mentioned earlier, books, notebooks, slide rule, laboratory equipment, anything within the classroom. But sir, why am I wasting time and saying all of this? I'll tell you why. A couple months ago, we came to this very Senate, and we had to discuss here what it was that triggered a state of emergency in Barbados. Sir, the act that we were looking at, the legislation said this is what can trigger that state of emergency. War, unrest, and other calamities. War, unrest, and other calamities. When I look at what other calamities can be, I said war, unrest, I suppose riots would pass, I suppose demonstrations would pass, uprising, political disturbance, civil protest, anarchy, that type of thing would pass. No, sir, we never had anything like a pandemic in contemplation when we were discussing that act, or when it was drafted. And so, sir, the Attorney General had said the best thing for me to do is to make assurance doubly sure. Let me go to Parliament and let me seek permission for having a health issue like the coronavirus listed as a possibility for triggering a state of emergency. But sir, we had it on the floor of this Senate that the Attorney General does not know what he's doing. He doesn't know what is going on. It is there ready, he can do it. He doesn't have to.
Point of order, Mr. President. I hate to interrupt the honorable member, but he's misleading the House.
Well, what do you raise, sir?
You see, he's misleading the Senate. You see, that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the imminence of a state of war between Barbados and another state, or as a result of the occurrence of any earthquake, hurricane, flood, fire, outbreak of pestilence, outbreak of infectious disease, or other calamity, whether similar to the foregoing or not. The Constitution has covered everything. So when the person got up and said the Attorney General knows what he's doing, the Attorney General did not read the Constitution, and he's now coming here reinforcing that he did. He's misleading the Senate. It says whether similar to the foregoing or not. So any emergency, and it says here in the Constitution, at Section 25, infectious disease. He just didn't know what he was doing.
Sir, all I'm saying there is that when the Attorney General was right, when he was wrong, and when he was right, he was still wrong. That under the Emergency Act, we were restricted, and that is what we had come under. We had come under that. No, sir. Where this particular bill is concerned, there are two sides to this argument. There's one argument where the minister responsible for the civil service, the Prime Minister, has power to create posts in the civil service. And that power is given under Section 13(1) of the Public Service Act. And sir, the Public Service Amendment Order 2020 was gazetted. on the 2nd of March 2020, and it showed that the post of a second deputy commissioner was indeed established. The question is, what was the effect of that order on Section 6 of the Police Act, which speaks to a single commissioner? I've heard, sir, I've read, I've seen the argument that says we have done enough and therefore we do not need to do any more. Sir, 2 months afterwards, on May the 1st, I think it was, Mr. Williams was appointed as the second Deputy Commissioner of the Royal Barbados Police Force. We already know that Mr. Boyce had already been appointed as a Deputy Commissioner as well. And then there was a second position or argument, and that one was saying that we cannot escape the fact that the order should have been laid in Parliament. We cannot escape the fact that the order should have been laid in Parliament. The second argument is also saying that the order is of no effect without parliamentary approval. And it is also saying that that order cannot trump or cannot impliedly repeal the Section 6 of the Police Act, and that Parliament has to tidy up the matter. So those are the two sides. Those are the two sides. And I must say, sir, that I never thought that when the concept of implied repeal was mentioned by the Prime Minister, it was not, I would never thought it was done in a kind of pushback manner. I never thought that it was done as if to say, we have done enough. I thought it was just mentioned as to say that there is something called implied repeal which we may be able to look at. We may have to look at it. That is all I think that the Prime Minister had been saying then. But as Senator Moore alluded this afternoon, so far, no one has refuted our starting position in this matter, which is that the organizational structure of the Royal Barbados Police Force is such that it can now accommodate 2 deputy commissioners of police. There is now enough work for 2 persons at that rank. And sir, the commissioner himself, as we've heard from both speakers so far, the commissioner himself had written requesting that a second deputy commissioner of police be appointed. And that, sir, is what had triggered the appointment in the very first place. Sir, long before this matter was raised in the Senate, sir, 2 khaki uniformed policemen had spoken to me on this matter. I do not know, cannot remember, didn't even try to remember their exact positions in the force. But they would have to be at the rank of senior superintendent of police, assistant commissioner, somewhere up there, because they're really khaki. They had mentioned it to me, and they had said, you all have to look into it, because there's only room in the law for 1 deputy commissioner. And I know that it was discussed among the hierarchy of the Royal Barbados Police Force. So discussion on this matter didn't originate in the Senate. And so even when they spoke to me, I could have given certain mouthings to it. I could have given it legs too. I could have run with it too. I could have made it appear as though it originated with me. But it did not, sir. It did not, sir. It is in our interest, sir. It is in our interest to ensure that the Royal Barbados Police Force is not continuously subjected to politics, to political rumors, or to low morale. It is in the interest of all of us in here to try to ensure that that does not happen. Our police force, Mr. President, should not be treated as a political football. And these two persons who are assigned to this position, sir, of Deputy Commissioner, these two deputies, they command the respect and the admiration, sir, of the entire force and much of the public. And sir, we want to put an end to things like policemen having to sue government for not being promoted for one reason or the other. We have to try to take the policing things out of the court. And the sooner we bring matters like this one under control, the better it would be for the police force and for this country. Sir, I am willing to let, you could almost say the other side, to let the other side, sir, put its case at its highest. That case could go at its highest. In other words, I am willing to accept that this is a mistake which was made and that we have to tidy it up. I am willing to say that. And so if we can complete this debate today, we can put an end to this matter once and for all. And I like the route we are going. And I say, sir, that if we go this particular route, not a fella would be able to argue that it does not have binding force. Not a fellow would be able to say that we did not conform to all of the formalities and perhaps more that is required by the law. After all, Mr. President, this was a simple oversight, an unintentional oversight from what the norm really should be. This was not an accusation of the Attorney General on a matter of corruption or theft or insider trading or sexual harassment. And one thing I can tell you, it certainly was, sir, was not, sir. It was not one of political indifference. It was not one of political incompetence. No. Indeed, sir, I challenge any one of us in here to say that the Attorney General of Barbados, Mr. Marshall, is not a good Attorney General. I challenge anybody to say that. I challenge anyone to say that he lacks the ability or the qualities or the skills for the job he is doing. He has been a very solid Attorney General. Our Prime Minister says that she has every confidence in him. Why should she dismiss him, as some people called for? Fortunately, Mr. President, this is a mistake which is correctable. That is the point. It's a mistake, sir, which the appointment, sir, can be validated. It is not, Mr. President, as though nothing can be done about it. It is not something, sir, which is incurable. It's a mistake, a genuine mistake that is correctable. And it can be corrected without any real financial loss to government. Of course, I have to admit, sir, that it is better not to make mistakes than to have to correct them. But there's nothing inappropriate about this correction which we are making. Even if it were possible, Mr. President, to avert this apparent breach by relying on the concept of implied repeal, even if that were possible, I personally prefer the route today, the one we are doing now, because most Barbadians understand this method of changing the act. That is, instead of saying one, we now say two. Most Barbadians understand that. I think, sir, that this is the more effective method. That is the method that most Barbadians understand. To most of them, sir, another route would be akin to define what they are anticipating should be done. I prefer this way. Because if we did it the other way, sir, that would have a more serious consequence. And it would create a more dangerous precedent. It would be a much steeper hill for us to climb. But once we go this route, Mr. President, I challenge anyone to say that in this matter, at any stage, this government acted as though it is above the law. Challenge anyone to say this once we do it this way. Sir, the point I'm making is that every misstep is not a dismissal misstep. Every misstep is not deserving of dismissal. So my mother used to flog me when I was a boy. But she didn't flog me for every mistake I made. If she had flogged me for every mistake I made, she'd be flogging me all like now. She would still be flogging. She often allowed me, sir, to say, I'm sorry, and to move on. And, sir, the other point is this, that if we had to ask every minister, every accountant, every CEO, every manager who has made a mistake, great or small, to resign or to be dismissed, nobody would be working. Nobody would be working. So neither the Attorney General nor, by extension, the government has given the impression that this administration is despotic, that we are domineering, that we are dictatorial, any of those words that we hear in here so often. We have heard that from various quarters. Up to this point of its short life, this government has never given the impression that it has to have its own way. We've been accused of it. We've never given anyone that impression. This government comes to the people, it listens to the people, and it often changes its position to suit the people. This government. I remember, sir, when this matter first broke in the public domain, the Attorney General said himself that he regretted what has happened. He says it is to be regretted. He didn't ask his permanent secretary to say so. He expressed the regret himself. He didn't seek to put blame on any public servant. He took the blame himself. It happened under his watch, and he accepted responsibility for it. He didn't try to downplay what happened at all. This Attorney General is not asking for a lighter burden. He is not asking for a lighter burden. All he's asking for is for broader shoulders, that he can carry on with his work. I said, sir, uneasy is the head that bears the crown. This Attorney General, sir, has piloted through Parliament several pieces of money laundering legislation, of which Barbados can be justly proud. He has made sure that additional judges have been appointed to ensure that the wheels of justice turn at an acceptable speed. I remember the many nights, one after the other, that he had to come to the public about the COVID directives and the curfews and so on, and had to explain them and answer some tough questions, sir. I remember that very well. And one of the most recent things I remember him doing is standing up to the EU for unfairly blacklisting this country. And he told the EU that they had convicted Barbados without a trial. We can't say that this man is a bad Attorney General. So this government expects criticism for various issues. Sometimes, as I said, the government takes certain aspects of that criticism, adopts that opposing view, corrects the mistake, and moves on. The classic example being the boss that we had the other day. Forced savings, meeting turn, ended up at boss. So again, this is not a stubborn, obstinate, and unrelenting or headstrong government. It is not. It is not a kind of like it or lump it government. And I take the opportunity to say, sir, to the Prime Minister, to the Attorney General, and to the entire team, that once you know that you are on the right path, if you are facing the right direction, all you have to do is to keep walking. Keep walking. Once you know you're on the right path, once you know you're facing the right direction, just keep walking. You are going to get criticism. So here's the condition, here's the situation, sir, where a mistake is admitted. We come to regularize the situation, and we had to amend the legislation. What is it that makes that such an unpardonable sin? That we can hear from the leader of the opposition, you must resign or else. What is there? I have said already, sir, that, you know, I'm not going to attack her, and so I have said it. But I'm sure that she has heard of the biblical passage, and I'm sure that Senator Rogers or Senator Holder will correct me if I say it wrong. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. I like it right. Because why I say that is because I remember when a certain group was in office that they had a situation at the Waterworks Department where there was one position of general manager, one person being paid as general manager and running the affairs of the authority. And then they had an executive chairman appointed, more management, doing the exact thing, doing the same thing. And when that was happening, sir, it was not part of the structure at the Water Authority, and yet they did it. So, as I said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. I remember too when someone who eventually became the Chief Justice of Barbados was appointed as Chief Justice, yes, and then had to have the legal criteria changed to fit an already appointed Chief Justice. Yes, we had someone appointed, and then we had to turn around and say, not yet, don't put him there yet, because he's square and the peg is a wrong one. And you had to get it changed up that he could fit. And I had no problem with that. But we are doing something which is so similar. And yet, all hell has broken loose. All hell has broken loose. I remember too, sir, when persons whose employment contracts were 1 year old up to the time of the last election. Only 1 year, some of the contracts got 3 years to go. And the 1 year contract, they were renewed. They were renewed. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Yeah. I remember that. So, Mr. President, I am not at all surprised that the leader of the Democratic Labour Party has called for the AG's dismissal over this matter. That is politics. I'm not surprised, sir, that is politics. We are all for criticism, because we know that we are the beacon of democracy in the Caribbean. Let them criticize. We do not seek to muzzle opposition. We do not. Sir, every government in office will always have its detractors. Every single government in office will have its detractors. There will be gloating every time any government makes a mistake. Some quarters they'll be gloating. If I tell you something, you wouldn't believe me, sir.
No,
I believe, sir, that if our corona numbers shoot up to 1,000, there'll be people in Barbados who will be gloating. I feel so. And nobody can't stop me from feeling so. I feel it if they shoot up. Every time they shoot up in the air, I feel in certain corridors there's rejoicing. Let's deal with that kind of attitude. I feel so. We got a lot of them. But sir, what we can tell that person is that we do not think that what occurred merits resignation or dismissal. But she has every right to make her call, because that is politics. The only thing, sir, that I will tell her, and I finish by saying it, I tell her, and it is this, that whether she knows it or not, time is longer than twine. she will soon come to realize it. That whether the knife falls on the melon or whether the melon falls on the knife, at the end of the day, it is only the melon that will suffer. Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. I next recognize Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, I don't intend to be long this afternoon, and I simply rose to address a burning issue that I felt needed to be addressed, having heard the presentation from one of the honorable senators. Now, controversial dialectic is an art form. It is the art of disputing in such a way as to hold your own position, whether or not you're even right. It is an art. Now, a person may objectively be right in their assertions and in their positions. But nevertheless, in the eyes of bystanders, people who may not understand the debate, people who may be none the wiser to what is true and what is false, in their eyes, they may perceive the person who is being truthful as the weaker of the persons in the debate. In other words, they may perceive that person to be the loser. And on the reverse, perceive the person who has refuted that person of truth's position as being the winner. So essentially, it is the ability to make people believe your position even if it is baseless, unfounded, untrue, and misleading. The art of controversial dialectic. Now, he who is most persuasive in his argument is right, and not necessarily who speaks the truth. And after listening to one of the honorable senators this afternoon, I immediately thought to myself, he may be practicing this art form this afternoon. He may be. I say practicing, Mr. President, because I don't believe that he has mastered that art form. After listening, I hold the view, and I felt based on his presentation, that it was a deliberate attempt to persuade listeners to believe a narrative that this government not only broke the law, but also gave a job to one of its friends. That was the suggested narrative that one of the honorable speakers and senators in this honorable chamber tried to persuade his listeners. Now, my feeling of this deliberate attempt was further cemented by the fact that he used another art form, the art of repetition, to constantly repeat the same thing in different ways as to how this government basically stopped short of moving mountains to ensure that this one individual got the post for the second deputy commissioner. Now, this is unfortunate. And I said this is unfortunate because this debate should never be about the individual. That is not the issue. At no point in time do I recall in his presentation did he say the individual did not excel in his previous post, nor did he excel in his current post. At no point in time did I hear him say that the individual is not deserving of the post. Arguments like that diminishes the credibility of the hard work and dedication that persons within the police force, especially this individual, have put within the police force. I cannot support that line of argument, and I will not support that line of argument. Do not use an individual as collateral damage to suit your personal agenda, which is to cause unsuspecting listeners to believe an unbased narrative, an ungrounded narrative that this government broke the law and that this government seeks to help a single individual to get a job. Now, I believe that the reason that he took this line of argument today and attempted to beat it home, technically beating a dead horse, was because this senator is full aware, and he raised the issue himself, that the real issue about this bill is whether or not the government's actions was legal. Whether or not the appointment to someone as second deputy commissioner of police was legal. And the reason that he took this line of argument is because his arguments were refuted. The assertion that the government acted illegally was refuted. Therefore, any questions about illegality of the government's actions should not be ventilated in this chamber. This is not a courtroom. This is a matter of law. This is a matter of whether or not one party is right or the other party is right. None of us in here can make that determination. And that is where his stomping ground is. Where there's no one to come to the fore to indicate who is right or who is wrong. Because on the one hand, you have a legal argument in support, and on the other hand, you have a legal argument against. No one can make the determination as to whether or not either of the parties is right. That is an issue that is law. So I will not even endeavor to speak on an issue like that in this round, because the average person may never be able to understand the arguments as they are outlined in this chamber. It would be a disservice to do such. But what I can say that every average person can understand is that in 2018, the Commissioner of Police wrote a letter giving reasons and grounds for why it was not only important but necessary to have a second post of Deputy Commissioner of Police created in the police force, because that specific post would enhance the overall effectiveness and operations of the police force. In other words, he needed assistance. He needed help. The police needed assistance in its management and administration. What also I can say is that this government did not pull the job from out of the sky. This is not a situation where the government decides tomorrow, I want to have the post of second deputy commissioner of police installed, and they can do it regardless of however somebody feels. This was done based on the recommendations of the chief officer of the police force, the commissioner of police. And he didn't just say he wants a second deputy. He gave reasons. He rationalized why it was important to do so. And only after consultation, only after the request, did this government comply with the said request and appoint a person to second deputy commissioner of police. Now, I can accept that based on what my colleagues and the Greenwich had indicated, that it may not have been the best way of going about the appointment. But hindsight is 20/20. In the current environment we were in, we were facing COVID. The Attorney General also indicated that if things were normal, we would have been here quicker, long time ago, we would have been here quicker than we wanted to be. But the unfortunate reality is COVID prevented us from getting here to do what we're currently here to do, which is to tidy up the form in which this appointment was done. But the reality remains is that the substance behind it all is uncontested. There's no issue about whether or not a second deputy commissioner should be appointed or whether or not the person there should or should not be there. That is not the issue. The issue solely relates to the form in which it was done. That is the issue. So I don't want the Honorable Senator to cause the persons of Barbados to believe that the government has a specific agenda to help its friends, because constantly in this place, that is some of the speeches that we hear. The government want to help this body, the government want to help the big friends. That is the constant rhetoric that we hear. But I could not sit here today and allow this one to go past, because he willfully used an individual as collateral damage to help his own agenda. I cannot allow that to happen. So, Mr. President, in closing, regardless of whatever side of the fence you are on as it relates to the issue here, what is not in contention is that the post was needed, it was necessary, and that it was recommended, and the government acted on that request. What is also not in contention is that we are here today to tidy up any issues that persons may feel may have occurred. What is also important to note is that this government stands by its belief in the rule of law. And that is why we are here. And at no point in time in the government's actions has it acted unconscionable or biased. The position and post of Second Deputy Commissioner of Police is not one that is of issue now. Because if this bill passes today, it is now satisfied all parties involved in the issue. And with those few words, I'm obliged.
She can speak. I think I've exhausted the list now, and now it's your turn, acting leader of the House, of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this debate, as usual sometimes in this chamber, was, I would say, spirited. But what I would like to say on this issue, Mr. President, is that despite all of the insinuations of some kind of sinister motives and all sorts of wild, that's what I could call them, wild, out in left field type remarks by some individuals, I think most Barbadians will agree that the police force in Barbados, like anything else that we do in Barbados in 2020, needs modernization. I heard some of my fellow senators speak in regard to some of the things that we see, some of the types of policing that we see in other parts of the world and other parts of that we would not mind doing here. We heard them speaking about, which I think I spoke about in others, CCTV and certain expansion of that. And I heard one of the senators speak about being able to capture infractions by individuals on the road. I know that is well in something that's in train is a technology called RIFID. And it's certainly used in the Caribbean and some Caribbean islands currently that use it. And certainly it is a very effective, a cost-effective way of enforcement of traffic regulations, which, you know, is part of the modernization of policing. Rather than have tons of policemen out there in cars just sitting down waiting for you, which takes a lot of time. And we already said earlier that the police have said on many occasions, not just in 2020, but before, that they've always had some shortages of personnel in terms of the number of individuals actively working in the police force at any one time. So certainly some of these modernization techniques that we have spoken about today would assist in their ability to be able to perform their duties in a reasonable and efficient manner. We heard people speaking about drones. We've seen it. We know it. Drones have good and bad ways in terms of how people use them. But we do know drones are very effective and are used worldwide, and not just in policing, but even in health and in all types of endeavors. And so certainly, once again, that is some of what we're speaking about here, where you're trying to improve a system, trying to improve an entity. And so not only is the entity improved by some of the things that they do in terms of technology, but also in terms of personnel and the number of personnel needed in order to perform the job function. I think the Deputy President of the Senate, Mr. President, spoke about appointment of new judges. I think we will be speaking about that in a bit, well, not judges, but appointments again, where that would help speed along the judicial system. And policing is like anything else. Sometimes it comes a time when you need additional personnel in order to assist in the improvements of the structure of an entity, and this is one such time. So there's no doubt, I think, in anyone's mind in Barbados that policing in Barbados has much area for improvement, only because it's like anything else in life where the improvements are required. I think Senator Wiggins had even spoken about things like domestic violence. But there has been improvements in domestic violence, Mr. President. We know that. At one time, the majority of murders in Barbados were domestic violence related. We know that. Those numbers have come down exponentially. Those are not the murders we're seeing now. I don't have the data or statistics here in front of me, but you can rest assured that that's in fact correct. Only because why? The police force, this police force that we have here, has taken a look and has a unit, an area that deals with domestic issues that previously would not have existed, say, 30 years ago. But because we know that there is an issue, and when I say we, the collective we as Barbadians and the police, that they then made sure that they addressed that issue, which would then lower the rate of the incidents of people dying within those circumstances. So you don't see the same number of domestic murders that you would have seen, or domestically related murders you would have seen at one time. So, but I'm not going to reiterate all that has been said here today, but just to say that the police force, like any other entity, sometimes you need to have new positions created. I do not think there's any entity in this world that has the same number of individuals that it would have had 20 or 30 years ago. You continue to have positions in order to assist in your being able to be efficient and expeditious in the application of what is required of your entity. And this is one such. And with regard to, and I must, Mr. President, comment on this. It was said in here that an individual was given the job because there was some friend or some kind of political motivation or what have you. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I just want to say this, Mr. President. The Protective Service Commission appointed Mr. Williams. It was not necessary to advertise the post, since the previous Service Commission placed Mr. Williams at the top of the priority list to be appointed if there was a vacancy between May 1st, 2018 and May 1st, 2020. And there is such a vacancy. Now, not this particular government, Mr. President. For those who come here to cast aspersions on people and make it seem that their promotion does not have merit. That is not the case. The individual in question was clearly good enough for a previous service commission, clearly well respected by a previous service commission. So if you are, the insinuation of political interference in this process is absolutely absurd. And it really is disappointing, Mr. President, sometimes when people who are so deserving, so well respected, and not just within the police, the area of the police force itself, but outside. But outside the police force, no one has anything negative to say about the individual. They're highly respected, more respected than many people. but yet people could cast aspersions on their character and say all kind of things in order to make some sort of baseless argument that has no foundation. Let me just indulge me, Mr. President, because I won't make it long. Let me repeat. A previous service commission placed Mr. Williams at the top of the priority list for those who will continue to believe other than what is in fact true, and that is that this individual is extremely well qualified for this post and well respected within the ranks of the force. And make no mistake about that, and outside of the force. Now, in wrapping up, Mr. President, I would just like to say that the Barbados Police Force, we would hope going forward, all of the other issues that people spoke about here today, like morale issues and all these other myriad issues one would get within the structure of any entity, can all move forward. All these things can move forward where we can have a functioning police force that is a good police force. And I can say, and I said it earlier in my initial presentation, the Barbados Police Force is well respected throughout the Caribbean. I have not been to a single Caribbean island where the people do not hold the Barbados Police Force and policing in Barbados in high regard. There's no perfection in anything. There isn't. But there's no perfection. Nothing. There's no perfection in trade union movement or trade unionism. So, but what we do know is that the police force here is regarded by others as being a sound, well-functioning, well-run entity in many respects, and we want that to continue. And so in closing, Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor, beg to move that this bill now be read a second time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 4.
Mr. President, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 4 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 5 to 7.
Mr. President, I beg to move that clauses 5 to 7 stand part.
The question is that clauses 5 to 7 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.